In our episodes, we discuss cases and topics that might be distressing or disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. This week, we are going to be talking about Jesse Leopold. Jesse has been missing since October 13th, 2016. He was 23 years old when he was last seen. But before we get into this case, I want to put up front that a search for Jesse is going to be held on March 22nd, 2025 at the Ledges State Park in Iowa. According to the press release put out by the Boone County Search and Rescue Group, the search will focus on around 23 acres of grasslands at the end of Peony Lane, which they say is an area that they've identified for further examination. They are asking for community volunteers to assist in this operation. In their press release, they say that they will release more details regarding volunteer participation closer to the search date. So if you are in Iowa, or if you know someone in Iowa, consider volunteering or share this episode with the people that you know. You can find this press release and look for more details on volunteer participation by checking out the Boone County Search and Rescue Facebook page, which I will link in the description of this episode. So let's dive into this case. We are going back to 2016. Jesse Leopold is 23 years old at this time, and he's working at a meat processing plant in Jewell, Iowa. Jewell is a small town. Its population is just over 1,000 people. And Jewell is located almost exactly in the center of Iowa. And though it's small, there are bigger towns near it. You have Ames and Des Moines to the south, and you have Fort Dodge just a little ways northwest. The meat processing plant that Jesse was working at was located in the western part of Jewell. And from what I can see online, it looks like maybe 50 to 100 people worked there. On Thursday, October 13th, 2016, Jesse is working his shift, and it's just before one of his breaks. An article in the Des Moines Register from 2023 says that just before his break, Jesse told his supervisor he was going to go pick up his medication. Jesse had been diagnosed as bipolar and he was on medication for it, but his use appeared to not be consistent as he often wasn't able to afford his prescription. Some articles say that Jesse left without telling anyone, but either way, he never returned to work. According to an article in the Ames Tribune, his shift was at 3 p.m., and when he had left, he had gone with the uniformed rubber boots still on, and other employees didn't realize that he hadn't returned until later on that evening. Management at W&G, which was the name of the meat processing plant, were certain that he didn't use the phone at work to call anyone, and Jesse's own phone had run out of minutes, so he wouldn't have been able to have used that to call anyone either. And Jesse's roommates, he lived with two roommates at the time, said that they last saw him when he left to go to work originally. So when he left work during his shift, he didn't go home, or at least his roommates say that they never saw him. On October 15th, Jesse's father, Jerry, learned from Jesse's roommates that they hadn't seen him since he had left for work on the 13th. At this point, Jerry had posted on Facebook asking if anyone had heard from him. Now, Jerry had raised Jesse since he was 6 years old and had split from Jesse's mother. By all accounts, the two had a great relationship, and Jerry knew of some of the struggles that Jesse was experiencing relating to his bipolar diagnosis and the struggle that he had to afford his medication. According to an article in the Indianola Tribune from 2018, Jerry believed that Jesse would frequently turn to illegal drugs because he couldn't afford his prescription. But Jerry believed that at the time of Jesse's disappearance, he had made it past those struggles with substance use. But he also knew that Jesse's drug use had put him in with a more threatening crowd. Because of this, when Jerry learned that Jesse hadn't been seen by his roommates in a while, he immediately sprung into action. On October 14th, the day after Jesse was last seen, a park ranger with the Ledges State Park noticed an abandoned vehicle. And it's discovered later on that this vehicle, a Ford pickup, belonged to Jesse. Now, when the park ranger noticed this vehicle, the connection wasn't made that it belonged to Jesse, but eventually on the 16th, Jerry learns about the vehicle and he goes to the park and checks it out. The truck is locked, the keys are still in the ignition, his work boots were in the back, and a smock, or potentially like a sweater of sorts, was draped over the steering wheel. At this point, from what I understand in my research, Jerry drives the vehicle home, and at this point reports Jesse as missing. And it does come up in later news articles that the fact that Jerry drove this vehicle home presented some challenges for investigators because it essentially contaminated any sort of evidence that they might have been able to have found in it. But Jerry, along with help from others, started immediately searching the area where the truck was found. Jerry is quoted in a Des Moines Register article as saying, quote, "I flipped out down in that canyon. We searched the park high and low all winter. I was up and down the river near Fraser, myself and a couple other people for weeks." Ledges State Park is about a 40-minute drive south of Jewell, Iowa, where Jesse was working. And this park is over 1,100 acres. There's a lot of different things you can do in it. You can do hiking, camping, there are streams you can walk through as well. And the terrain of this park, though, is described as being unusual. It's called the Ledges State Park because of how the terrain has developed over millions of years. It's developed these literal rock ledges. And so, from the photos I can see of the state park, it definitely wouldn't have been easy to search this area. There's just a lot of cliffs, a lot of really big rocks. Jerry wasn't the only one searching the area. The Boone County Sheriff's Office did conduct a search of ledges, but the current sheriff has openly questioned how effective those searches were. Sheriff Godzicki, who was a detective during those first searches, is quoted in the Des Moines Register as saying, quote, "There was some documentation of the search of ledges to kind of show the area. Cadaver dogs were brought in, but it's unknown the quality of those dogs at the time, or quite frankly, how well the park was searched." End quote. Now, Godzicki commented on how the terrain of the park made it difficult, and that many of them, while they were searching, would be watching their steps to make sure that they didn't fall, rather than looking around for signs or evidence that Jesse had been there. Godzicki said, "I don't know that we'll ever be able to say that we have properly searched ledges." Now, these statements from Sheriff Godzicki were from November of 2023 when another search of the park was organized. And obviously, that search didn't result in finding Jesse, but that search, Jesse's truck being found there, and this new search in 2025 being organized definitely show to me that police believe that this is where Jesse likely is. But why would Jesse have gone to the Ledges State Park? In my research and seeing what police and investigators have commented, it seems to me like they are insinuating and at sometimes outright saying Jesse perhaps drove to the Ledges State Park either due to being on drugs or due to mental health issues, and that perhaps he went there to take his own life. An article in the Des Moines Register reads, Boone County Sheriff Andy Godzicki said mental health could potentially play a role in Jesse Leopold's disappearance. Quote, "Jesse does have a history of suicide attempts," Godzicki said. "Jesse did have some mental struggles. In addition, we also have reason to believe that Jesse used LSD earlier that day." I don't have information on what leads them to believe that he took LSD earlier that day, but I do think that the idea that he potentially took his own life is a plausible one. We know he struggled with his mental health. His father has also confirmed that. And we know that he had a bipolar diagnosis and that he struggled to be able to afford medication for it. That, on top of the many other struggles people face on a day-to-day basis. Now, I have followed a lot of missing person cases in Iowa, and I found that the public or at least the discourse that I see on social media, the public has a hard time, I think, grasping some of the reasons why men disappear. I'll see comments when an adult male disappears, and it's a lot of, something fishy's going on here, or a man wouldn't just up and leave his family. And on some level, I understand that thought process. But many immediately jump to foul play, to the man having have been kidnapped, or people always want to say it's the cartels or something like that. And I don't know if it's just people want to believe it's a mystery or some sort of conspiracy, but the more logical answer a lot of the time is that a person might have overdosed or maybe took their own life. And those are serious problems that need to be discussed more. And those problems can be overshadowed when the focus is on a criminal conspiracy that there doesn't seem to be any evidence for. I mean, let's look at suicide amongst men. According to CDC data, males make up 50% of the population, but they account for nearly 80% of all suicides. The suicide rate among men is 4 times higher than the rate among women. Research also shows that men die of overdoses at 2 to 3 times greater a rate than women in the United States, and this includes overdoses from things like fentanyl, heroin, meth, or cocaine. We saw both of these play out in 2023 when David Schultz, a truck driver from Iowa, went missing. During a search for him, the remains of another missing man, Mark Reesberg, were found, and he had died from a reported self-inflicted gunshot wound. The remains of David Schultz were found later on, and investigators determined he had died from a drug overdose. In both cases, the public was adamant, and still is, that foul play was involved in both men's disappearances. I say all of this not to suggest that every missing person case should be assumed to be a suicide or, a drug overdose, but I think it's important to come to conclusions based on the evidence. And I think that can be difficult for the public, especially when police don't always release what they find initially, and people always do tend to speculate. I do think that missing person cases should be treated with the urgency that they deserve. But I just want to highlight that sometimes the public speculation can get so out of hand and it can be very harmful for the people that are living through the trauma of having a missing loved one. Now, according to an article in the Ames Tribune, investigators have looked into this case from the angle that foul play was involved. Sheriff Godzicki said the problem with the theories and the potential leads they've received where people claimed foul play was involved was that there weren't any first-hand accounts, and what they were hearing were mainly rumors that couldn't be substantiated. He said these leads don't fit in with what they know occurred the day Jesse went missing, and that he believes their best bet is to continue searching Ledges State Park. But the sheriff does say that they will continue to look into other areas and leads outside of Ledges. Since Jesse was last seen in 2016, his father, Jerry, has been extremely active and persistent in trying to find out what happened to his son. He runs a Facebook page where he documents his findings, and it has almost 10,000 followers. The Facebook page was initially created just about a week after Jesse went missing in 2016, and it provides a lot of good information showing how things unfolded in real time back in 2016. So, for example, Jesse's sister Angela posted the following, and I'm just going to read it. It's like almost like reading into a diary of what happened. Thursday, October 13th, which would have been 2016. Per his roommate/coworker, he started acting odd during the newscast they were watching. He got quiet and stayed that way until work, where his supervisor had him work on his own as it was obvious he wasn't focusing as usual. Around 6:30 p.m., he was seen hanging up his jacket at work by coworkers who thought he was going to the restroom. Around 7:30 p.m., it was discovered he had left the premises in his truck. He left his phone, personal shoes, and sunglasses behind. Friday, October 14th. Roommate contacted Jesse Leopold to let him know Jesse was acting odd and that he hadn't returned home that night. Jerry contacted the Boone, Story, and Hamilton County Police and hospitals to see if he had been picked up or brought in anywhere with no hits. Truck was ticketed by DNR for being parked overnight in Ledges. And then in parentheses, this wasn't known until Sunday. Saturday, October 15th. Jerry created a flyer and spoke with some community members and began hanging the flyers. There was a post put on Facebook with information on him and his truck. Sunday, October 16th. Around 7 a.m., someone came forward with the information that Jesse's truck was found in lower ledges. By 10 a.m., Jerry had received the truck and filed a missing persons report. Truck was found with doors and toolbox unlocked and the keys in the ignition in the last paved parking space before the fourth water crossing. His rubber boots he walked out in were found in the bed of the truck along with his socks. Search and rescue was organized and sent out to search the area. Friends and volunteers joined the effort. Monday, October 17th. Knowledgeable friend of Jerry's contacts him with info of search/cadaver dogs. Sheriff is contacted and dogs are filed for. Within a couple hours, a group with dogs has arrived and the area around his truck is searched, but she is unfortunately unable to pick up a trail. We searched the ledges area some more before returning home. Tuesday, October 18th. KCCI came out with their helicopter to search the area from the air. They are working on compiling the newscasts from that day for us. So that was just like a synopsis of like one of the posts. And so you can go way back to 2016 when this group was started and kind of see how all of these developments came out. And since then, Jerry Leopold has posted updates on his own search, and he's highlighted on the Facebook page, and it's also been noted in some news articles, that through Jerry's own investigation, he does believe something happened to his son, and it's more than a suicide or a potential drug overdose. Jerry has said on the Facebook page that his own investigation has uncovered evidence that leads him to believe that Jesse was, quote, beaten, robbed, kidnapped, tortured, murdered, dismembered, and disposed of. I don't know what that evidence is, so I cannot speak to that. But it is clear, based on the statements Jerry has made on the Find Jesse Leopold Facebook page, that he's not satisfied with the investigation into his son's disappearance by the Boone County Sheriff's Office. And I'm not surprised by that. Even the comments from the current sheriff indicate that the original search of Ledges State Park was not thorough. The sheriff has made comments about, quote, some documentation being done of the initial searches, and that even the quality of the original cadaver dogs was questionable. So, as a parent myself, I can completely understand being more than frustrated by and not trusting police to handle this. And despite the sheriff saying that they have investigated leads outside of Ledges State Park, Jerry has made comments about too much focus being in this park and not enough into other avenues. It's a tough situation. From an outside perspective, I can see why the focus has been on that state park. I mean, it's where his vehicle was found, and it's, from what I've seen, the only solid piece of information that they have. I don't know why the initial investigation into his disappearance appears to have not been taken seriously. My only thought is that perhaps it wasn't taken seriously due to Jesse's history of substance use. And this is really all the information I have on this case. There isn't a lot out there. Most articles all have the same bits of information and the same quotes. In looking through the posts that Jerry Leopold has made on the Facebook page, you can feel the devastation and the desperation he has in wanting to find his son and get answers. He believes his son is dead, but he still deserves closure. Every parent with a missing child deserves answers and closure. Jerry is quoted in an article with the Indianola Tribune as saying, quote, I miss him bad. I can't derive pleasure from anything I used to do. So this is something I have to do, or I feel I'll be failing him once again. He was the only one to continue the Leopold name. When they killed him, they killed my family line. If you have any information at all on the disappearance of Jesse Leopold, please contact the Boone County Sheriff's Office at 515-433-4786, or you can send tips to the Iowa Cold Case Unit at coldcase@ag.iowa.gov. And if you are able to help with the search of Ledges State Park that is set to take place on March 22nd, 2025, Please follow the Boone County Search and Rescue Facebook page for more details on how to participate and help. And if you're listening to this episode and it's after March 22nd, consider sharing Jesse's story with your circle. You never know who has the missing piece of information that will help find him. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Cardinal Crimes. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing, giving us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast, and sharing this episode with others. You can find us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram with the handle @CardinalCrimes, and you can send us any case suggestions, questions, or topics you would like covered there or to our email, cardinalcrimes@gmail.com. Until next time, friends, take care of each other and take care of yourself.